The American presidential primaries are upon us, and the forerunner on the right is the billionaire Donald Trump. And the Republican Party establishment is quaking. Time magazine reports that the top Republican pollster Frank Luntz came out of a focus group meeting with rank-and-file Republican voters, and his legs were shaking. Why? Because Trump is a moronic Howard Beale of the right, channeling an incoherent grassroots anger at the old leadership. And he's getting a lot of attention. Media Matters for America reports that Trump was given more time than any other Republican presidential candidate on Fox News. But it isn't just Fox. As CNN reports, he leads among all broadcasters by a wide margin, getting more than 3 times the coverage of his nearest rival, Jeb Bush. And the reason? They say he's a ratings machine. There's no doubting the almost messianic fervour he excites among his right-wing base. Consider this now famous image, shown here in the Daily Caller, of a frantic crowd in Alabama with a woman thrusting her baby at Trump and a sign being held up that reads, "Thank you, Lord Jesus, for President Trump." Or consider the woman at a New Hampshire campaign stop who rushed to the stage to touch Trump's hair, shown here by Fox News. It is a sinister personality cult, says the liberal Salon magazine. But the conservative Washington Examiner also situates Trump in a trend of conservative celebrity cults. Like Howard Beale, Trump is a pure media product. The extraordinary cult that surrounds this loud-mouthed business crook would be impossible without the same media that now seems vaguely horrified by his presidential bid. Even the right-wing, Murdoch-owned Wall Street Journal is aghast at Trump's success and blasts the conservative media for being his apologists. Yet Trump has always enjoyed a close relationship with all the mainstream media, including top television stations. He has been a reality television host on the US version of The Apprentice. On this program, each week he gets to preen and posture like a little emperor, bossing about minions who worship him and grovel to him. And the libidinal high of the show is when he points his finger at one of his sycophantic employees and says, "You're fired." He's also run the Miss USA and Miss Universe pageants, which NBC has been kind enough to broadcast for him. And he's been a regular on right-wing talk shows. Trump built his celebrity on the back of his business empire, where he refined his bullying, blowhard demeanor that now wows the voters. The real estate business that Trump inherited from his father was, as the Washington Post tells us, a middle-class housing empire. Middle class is the American idiom for workers who aren't queuing at the soup kitchens. This was rental housing for workers in Queens and Brooklyn. Trump Jr., however, was more interested in the glamour. He moved to Manhattan and used his money to promote grand architectural projects designed to win him attention. As Olivia Nuzzi writes at the Daily Beast, he made friends with mafia men and the old McCarthyite warhorse Roy Cohn. From Cohn, whose hugely unethical practices had helped ensure that Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were given the death penalty, he learned a valuable lesson about how to bully the right people and work the gossip columnists. And the Huffington Post reports that it was Cohn who represented Trump when the family real estate company he was running, Trump Management Corporation, was sued by the Justice Department for racist discrimination. Taking Cohn's advice, Trump took the uncommon step of suing the Justice Department for defamation, seeking $100 million in damages. The lawsuit was a media gimmick, and eventually the corporation had to settle out of court, promising not to discriminate. But only 3 years later, the Justice Department sued the company again for the same racist practices. A revelatory profile of Trump by Vanity Fair in 1990 revealed that he continued to pile up cash in large part thanks to scamming clients, the old Trump bullshit as he called it, and being supported by a raft of banks eager to make utterly reckless loans to his corporation. And with this money, he shifted his focus from luxury accommodation to the construction of grand hotels and casinos and convention centers. Apart from ruthlessness, Trump has profited from high-risk strategies that have at times left his businesses bankrupt and even driven him to the brink of personal bankruptcy. Nonetheless, he was rescued by the death of his father in 1999. The division of his father's fortune among the children left Donald Trump with, according to the New York Times, a share of some $300 million to play with. 2 years later, the giant Trump World Tower was completed opposite the United Nations building in New York. And by 2006, he was thoroughly back in the game. Forbes magazine reported that he owned several millions of acres of prime Manhattan real estate and was probably worth around $2.9 billion. Admittedly, half of what Trump himself said it was, but then that's the old Trump bullshit for you. Since 2011, Trump has been pitching his thoughts as a right-wing conservative Republican on social media. A big part of Trump's appeal to right-wing American voters is that he's a rich man who doesn't care and will say anything, especially if it is at the expense of women and black people. In short, he is the white wing of the right wing, channeling the ferocious anti-black, anti-immigrant nationalist energies of a dormant Tea Party movement into his presidential campaign. They finally found their guy. One might expect that he would tone it down for the campaign. Not Trump. When not bragging about his relationship to the blacks, he has referred to Mexican immigrants as criminals and rapists, generating outrage from a range of media outlets. The Independent reports that NBC fired Trump after his racist remarks. The New York Times reports that Trump's racist anti-immigrant policies have induced fury among Latino broadcasters, and Jorge Ramos of the right-wing Univision television station, itself with a dubious record on racism, has laid into Trump's policy, calling him the loudest voice for division, hatred, and intolerance in the United States. And a more serious byproduct of Trump's immigrant bashing was that two Boston brothers took to the streets, found a homeless Hispanic man sleeping outside a train station, pissed on him, and then beat him viciously with a metal pole. When asked why they did it, The Atlantic reports that they said, "Donald Trump was right. All these illegals need to be deported." Trump's response to this, amazingly enough, was to, as the Boston Herald reported, exult that the people following me are very, very passionate. They love this country. They want this country to be great again, but they are very passionate. There are signs amid all this derangement that the media's interest in Trump is beginning to sour. There are growing hints, for example, that Trump represents a near-fascist surge. Newsweek asks, in all seriousness, is Donald Trump a fascist? Their answer? Maybe. Salomon is in no doubt. Donald Trump is an actual fascist, mobilizing a reaction against recent social progress and economic stagnation. It has been pointed out that, according to Vanity Fair's 1990 profile of the man, he took inspiration from reading a collection of Hitler's speeches. Is this clown really a fascist? Perhaps not, but he is channeling an ugly mood. Matt Taibbi of Rolling Stone wrote in the aftermath of the Boston racist assault, "The political right in America has been flirting with dangerous ideas for a while now, particularly on issues involving immigrants and minorities. But in the last few years, the rhetoric has got particularly crazy. And with that climate, Americans were more primed than ever to get off on Trump's strongman act, his willingness to defy every political and social convention and get away with it." There's also another factor. While Trump bases his pitch almost entirely on free market conservatism, the liberal website Mediaite points out that he came out in opposition to cuts in Medicare and Social Security. This is a classical populist combination offering downwardly mobile older whites the fire of racist nationalism linked to a few material incentives. Now, the problem with the cult of personality, however, is that much depends on the particular unpleasantness of the personality involved. So when a Fox News anchor, Megyn Kelly, attempted to do some journalism at the first Republican primary debate by asking Trump about his derogatory comments toward women, he'd referred to women as fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. As the Washington Post tells us, he threw a massive huff. Fox News had been his campaigning lifeline, had built up his base months before he formally declared his candidacy. But from that moment on, as Liberal anchor Rachel Maddow points out on MSNBC, he stopped going on any Fox News program. Eventually, the New York Times reports, Fox chief Roger Ailes called Trump and assured him that Fox would treat him fairly. But Trump couldn't keep his resentment in check and continued to attack Megyn Kelly, resulting in a further row with Fox News. Roger Ailes, Politico reports, stands by Kelly and demands that, although Trump rarely apologizes, in this case he should. Ordinarily, all this would be a serious setback. Not for Trump. His poll ratings among Republican voters continued to soar. The International Business Times reports that a recent nationwide poll showed that Trump had a favorability rating of 52%, up from 40% 3 weeks earlier, and notably, his unfavorable rating dropped from 41% to 35%. Like other right-wing populists, Trump thrives when the media both give him the platform, the issues to talk about, and then adopt a stagey antagonism with him. Through all of these encounters, no matter how much he blusters, Trump is burnishing his credentials as an Ersatz enemy of the establishment that made him.